Have to spend time online trying to find the best deal. That's up to 75% off. Just call me, the Hotel Whiz. It's a free call and you get instant access to rates too low to publish with no cancellation fees.
Make a free call now and save up to 75% off your hotel rooms the next time you're going somewhere for business or pleasure. Call the Hotel Whiz now and get instant access to rates too low to publish. 800-378-2714. 800-378-2714. 800-378-2714. Call the Hotel Whiz right now for rates too low to publish. 800-378-2714.
You're stepping into the fast lane on the VTRN Sports app. 93.3 FM and 1320 AM Lynchburg, or by asking Alexa or Google Home, open VTRN Sports Lynchburg. Now, take the fast lane through the topics that matter across the Commonwealth. This is the Fast Lane with Ed Lane.
What's that old saying about throwing stones when you live in a glass house? I don't know if that's exactly the right phrase or if it's another one of these great cliches that I'll be butchering to start the fast lane. But it's Virginia fans out there that may have made fun of Virginia Tech because once upon a time they lost their women's basketball coach, Kenny Brooks, to an SEC program that didn't seem to be in the best spot, but seemed to be in a better spot than where they currently were. Now Virginia's dealing with the same thing with Brian O'Connor last night. And Trey Lyle did a great job of, I don't know if you call it documenting this or mocking it on the morning warm-up, but within an hour after Mississippi State had been eliminated from the College World Series, Brian O'Connor was announced as the new men's baseball coach at Mississippi State. This clearly, I mean, this is one of those where, like, we need the Three Stooges sound effects.
Are you that dumb?
Nobody is that dumb. Everybody knows that when that's in fact the case, this deal was consummated and finalized well before then. This was merely just a formality that they were waiting until you finally got to this point and you're like, oh, okay, now that's the case. I mean, for crying out loud. By midnight Eastern last night, Brian O'Connor had already said, bye. Yes, an ode to, maybe not NSYNC, but Justin Timberlake, M-Town represent. As Brian O'Connor was in Starkville, Mississippi, to be introduced as the new baseball coach at Mississippi State, and bringing a good chunk of his staff with him. This is generally the way coaching changes work. I mean, that's the overall reality is O'Connor's going to bring a majority of his system and staff in place. He's going to probably bring a good number of the better players that Virginia had, because now with name, image, and likeness, he can afford to do that. And it goes to what we've said so often in the fast lane, that the SEC's greatest strength, and the Big Ten as well, it's not necessarily the fact that the schools directly pay players, because let's keep it real, this is outsourced payment. Like, this is not how a normal business operates at this juncture. July 1st, quite possibly going to change, depending on how this whole House settlement goes. If you want to keep playing chicken with a federal judge, their words, not mine, go right ahead. But until then, and even through then, those two conferences have more resources than everybody else. And right now it's the leverage to say to their donors, hey, rather than donating to the athletic department, donate to pay players. Because if everybody's asking their alumni to donate to pay players, we can ask our more people alumni, because the SEC has, generally speaking, larger schools with endowment, and they're more passionate about sports. And you can put the Big Ten in there for a lot of state-funded institutions as well to go ahead and do that. So you've got that part of the equation. Boutique conference, ACC, with your little cute little Boston colleges, and sorry to the media folks out there, but Syracuse is like, it just doesn't have the same oomph, the same muscle behind your conference that big boy programs and the big boy conferences do. But when you have that TV revenue that those programs do in the SEC and the Big Ten, it affords them the ability to then tell their donors, hey, don't worry about donating to us. We can fund our athletic department on these gargantuan TV payouts that we're receiving for coaches, coaching staff salaries, player support salaries, facilities, which are less important than ever, because when you're talking about paying money, If I'm a player, I'd rather get the money myself than have it go into a facility. It's kind of like at the Virginia Talk Radio Network. You can check out our video stream at Fastlane Edlane or VTRN Sports, and it may not be the most elaborate studio decoration, but I'd rather ask the ownership to, make sure we're getting paid and having those resources to stay on the air rather than all the cute bells and whistles. So we're talking in that context here. That's an advantage for Mississippi State. It was an advantage for Kentucky compared to Virginia Tech when Virginia Tech lost women's basketball coach Kenny Brooks. This is just the world in which we live in sports. And there's the reality that when you're having to ask your donors to fund paying players, which is much harder to do, by the way, I would say, than it is to ask them to donate to support a coach that may stick around for a while, at least is contractually obligated to. Players are under no contract because we want to never make them employees. Why would we ever do that? So let's just go ahead and let them have full carte blanche and be open-ended contractors all the time. That makes so much sense. But you talk about this in the context of sports, it's bound to happen. Virginia's in a not too dissimilar spot to Virginia Tech in the sense that if you're talking about needing to create a hierarchy, and when you're outside of the power conferences, you need to create a hierarchy. I get Virginia's history in men's basketball, and 7 to 10 million, they're in that group of 8 schools in the ACC that are in the 7+ million per year funding for players. That group of schools. But when you're in that group, you can afford to play men's basketball. You're going to invest in football. Tech did it last year, not great results. They're going to keep doing it. Virginia did it this past offseason, 30+ transfers. We all know about Clemson to retain, Miami to acquire in Tampa perhaps, and then Florida State, even without the results last year, they've had other years where they've hit in the transfer portal. They're paying for players. And if you're in a school, TJ, that's in the ACC, you need to prioritize what's going to give you the best chance to land somewhere when, not if, but when there's another shakeup, which, here's a shocker, is going to come around 2030 when it's easier to get out of the Atlantic Coast Conference to maybe just create a conference where we shed the dead weight of the ACC.
I think Florida State and Clemson are going to not shock the world. We know they want to leave, but I think in 2030, it's when they make the move because it's easier contractually to leave the ACC.
Oh, for sure. I mean, you're getting to all of that. And because of all that, until then, you're kind of balling on a budget, so to speak. If you're an ACC program, like you got to be judicious about where you spend money. In the SEC, it's easier to feed more mouths.
I'm just confused. UVA is a big private school, right? Like they're on Duke level private.
They're public.
Oh, they're public.
They are public.
But
they are obviously an extremely financially well-endowed university.
I don't know. I'm sorry for the misinformation.
No, but you talk about the big part where I will back you up on the big part, TJ, is big
dollar bills, y'all.
Base for months, as Kenny Powers would remind us. $6 billion endowment. And again, I know plenty of UVA people who remind me regularly, church, social functions, Fast Lane, Ed Lane on the social media platforms, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. They'll remind me a lot of that's earmarked specifically not for athletics. But when you have that volume of money there, it means there are enough wealthy people into whom you can tap when it really matters most.
I just wonder, when are we going to see the big bucks come in for UVA? Because, I mean, fans summed it up better. UVA athletics is down the toilet right now. I mean, Ron Sanchez, you hope to see it get better with him at basketball with Tony Bennett gone and
you mean Ryan Odom?
Ryan Odom. I'm sorry. Ron Sanchez became an assistant coach
at Baylor
somewhere else. Yes, sir. My fault. I'm sorry about
More
that.
on that in the Fast Five at 5.
And the football team too. I mean, I'm curious as to how UVA is going to really build up these athletic programs. When are we going to see more boosters come in? When are we going to see more faith in UVA athletics for them to be able to make these moves and stay on a Clemson, Florida State level in the ACC, let alone a SEC level?
So if you're blaming Carla Williams, and that's kind of become the flavor du jour of Virginia fans.
I am blaming Carla Williams. I'm not blaming anybody. I'm just curious, when are we going to see UVA pick up the pace?
I'll give my best opinion on that. And please, if you're a listener, keep it coming. FastLaneEdlane@gmail.com. Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. You can DM us as well and throw a different name or tell us you don't want us to use your name, and we'll come up with aliases because we get creative like that if we need to in the fast lane, especially for great content. But here's the thing. I think for Virginia Tech, I just think there's so many people they were going to be able to tap into. And it was always a football school. And Kenny Brooks saw that, and he went to Kentucky, which I know it's men's basketball, but they are a basketball-first school state program. Virginia Tech is still football first. Now, they have more success in all the other sports in the last 10 plus years, but football is not caught up. And football is their identity. And frankly, football is going to be their meal ticket if they want to get into the SEC, the Big Ten, or maybe some other third conference that's kind of a shedding of the ACC's dead weight and grabbing the best of the Big 12, which I don't rule out the possibility for that. But you're talking the ACC, structurally speaking, that's for Virginia Tech. For Virginia, there are just more people in whom you can call to put more money to the table. And I'll answer yours. Football has gotten it. When you're talking about the amount of money, 30-plus transfers from the portal. I mean, if there's a compliment to Virginia football, I know like your old school UVA fans will scoff at this, but when Deion Sanders called out Virginia like a month ago, excuse me, I need to get it right.
Oh, no. Oh, no.
That's right. I'm sorry, Coach Prime. Your name is Coach Prime, not Deion Sanders. But when Coach Prime called out Virginia and basically said,
And guess what? We keep receipts.
at that social media post that Virginia was tampering with his players, there are a lot of Virginia supporters that are going, yes, thank you. Finally, we're doing that. But there's a reality that Virginia is playing catch up, and I think Brian O'Connor's departure is a part of that. Much more than I'd say Virginia Tech. I think the academically minded schools, sorry to Virginia Tech fans, I don't mean you have to be an idiot to graduate or to get in there or to get in and graduate from Tech, but Virginia prides itself on academic excellence, uncompromised excellence.
Sorry, Trey.
Yeah. Duke, Carolina, a lot of the boutique schools the ACC brought in. Why do we need West Virginia? Let's bring in Boston College because it's more academically minded, even though no one cares about sports up there.
Stanford in California.
Yeah, exactly. Those schools that are kind of pinky out when you drink schools, for those that are watching, I'll use my drink right now as an analogy for humor's sake. But for those schools, there was a shunning of the idea of paying players. Virginia has gotten on board with that. Alexis Ohanian, he wants to bankroll women's basketball. He's Serena's husband, go to women's tennis, and founder of Reddit. If he wants to do it, fantastic. I think it's awesome. They're doing it with football. The reports out there, Matt Norlander of CBS, 7 ACC schools at least we're paying $7+ million per year for a basketball roster. And some of them being academically minded schools. Duke had no problem doing it, whether it was Coach K or John Shire. Reports just from Duke's collective, Cooper Flagg making $4 million a year, and newsflash, he's not the only one getting paid there. But that, North Carolina, now finally up on board, you can laugh about that. Miami, I know you can talk about them being great academics and maybe not always caring for football. We know how that goes, even as a self-proclaimed Miami fan, but they're involved in the pay-for-play in basketball. Virginia, NC State, Louisville, obviously involved. Tech is starting to pony up money in those sports. You're getting on board with it. But a lot of ACC programs have frowned upon that idea of, we're too good, we shouldn't have to do this. Well, guess what? That's great and all, but you fell behind other programs commitment-wise, resource-wise, and understanding how to get people financially on board within your program. And I go back to the conversation we had, never forget it, December 9th, 2021. It's right after Virginia got upset by JMU in men's basketball in that glorious, aesthetically appealing 52-49 game where Virginia scored fewer than 20 points in the first half of that game. We had Gary Parrish, Eye on College Basketball podcast, CBS Sports, here in the Fast Lane. And I know this is a longer than normal soundbite, but it hits the nail on the head about how the SEC has now poached a prominent, successful coach from Virginia baseball, Brian O'Connor to Mississippi State, and Virginia Tech, Kenny Brooks, women's basketball to Kentucky. Both of them, within the prior years, having good postseason runs. Lady Hokies, Final Four. Virginia baseball, last year, College World Series. Here's what Gary Parrish said that continues to resonate because it continues to hit the nail on the head that I think the ACC is playing catch-up, but it's still costing them compared to how the SEC was thinking back in late December of 2021.
And so one of the things I was told, Mike Sly told every athletic director, president in the conference was, you've got all this money that we have generated, from a CBS contract and an ESPN contract and the SEC network, but we need to have good men's basketball on this SEC network. So if you've got the coach that you believe in, give him every resource available to be great. If you've got the facility that you believe in, pour every penny into it that you can to make it as great as it can be. On the other side, if you don't have the coach you believe in who's going to be great, fire him. Pay him to go away and go hire somebody who's going to be great. And if you don't have facilities that are adequate, upgrade them. You have the money. you've got to commit to this sport. And the league did it, top to bottom, just about. They really went out and spent money on coaches, spent money on facilities, spent money on recruiting. And though it took them longer to get where I suggested they were headed so many years ago, they're now clearly there.
Oh, and what's crazy again about that Gary Parrish soundbite, and he's talking about SEC basketball. That was December of 2021, heading into the 21-22 season. 3 full seasons. 3 full seasons before the SEC had 14 bids in the men's basketball tournament. Look at the Women's College World Series, or listen to it right here on the VTR and Sports app. 3 of those final teams that remain, Texas, Tennessee, and Oklahoma, guess where they play? The SEC. The other, Texas Tech, who paid for Nyjah Kennedy, reportedly according to The Athletic, $1 million to come play softball for them. Well, more doubling at least what she would make at Stanford. Again, Texas Tech, huge oil money. They have announced that they want to play big boy sports. Whenever the breakoff happens, if the SEC and the Big Ten don't want Texas Tech, if you're the ACC, I'm eyeing that particular school. I'm eyeing Baylor because Baylor will play that game. Heck, it may sound ridiculous, but I'm eyeing Liberty for a group of 5 if I'm one of these programs. They spend a lot more than some Power 5 programs do, and they're not thumbing their nose up at the idea of paying for resources. They at least 5x'd Jamie Chadwell's salary when he left Coastal to go to Liberty. Nobody at Liberty has ever denied that. I know they're a private school, but I've used that reference so often in the fast lane that if it was outdated, I would imagine somebody would have denied it. That's what Liberty can provide. The ACC has turned their nose up at this concept for a while. And in the defense of the ACC schools, Virginia included, Virginia Tech included, I think there's an element of you have to prioritize certain sports. And if you're Virginia, let's use them for example. We mentioned Virginia Tech. That's easy. It's a football school. They're going to continue to invest in that. And their best chance of landing in a more desirable financial situation in conference is to get better at football. And if Brent Pry doesn't get it turned around this year, they need to find a new coach that will do that for the betterment of that program and to continue to make them appealing and show that that's where they're going to invest. And if other sports suffer, they will. And in particular, you want good men's basketball because it's a front-facing revenue-generating sport. But everything else after that, including women's hoops, as much as I love it, loses money. Virginia's in the same boat. If they need to prioritize football, they're doing it. Alexis Ohanian, he wants to do it himself for women's hoops. Be glad you have that. Women's basketball, you've got that with him covered. Men's basketball, part of the 7 that are paying $7+ million per year, according to Matt Norlander, Gary Parrish's colleague on CBSSports.com. But Brian O'Connor kind of told you what he thought when he spoke with the media last week without officially saying he left, but basically giving the reasons why.
That's a great question. I mean, I haven't in this, since the selection show, had time to talk to any other ACC coaches. I got a few text messages of, from them that disappointment that we didn't get in, right? But, hey, that's existed for quite some time, and, the resources in some situations can be different, and that impacts it. Right. So that's
the resources can be different right there. And he's stammering. But here's the crazy thing. Brian O'Connor went on for another 30+ seconds and continued to elaborate on the resource gap between the SEC and the ACC top to bottom.
That exists in every sport. And we're seeing that in college basketball now, the emergence of the SEC. Right. And so certainly, when you see bids come out, when you see host sites come out, the fact that Georgia Tech didn't get one and things like that, I'm never going to criticize the committee. They got a very challenging job to do, right? But that kind of sends a little bit of a message of, where a group of people that are on a committee think about where conferences stack up in college baseball.
And that goes back what Brian O'Connor mentioned at the end, where conferences stack up in college baseball and what the thought process is. It's not the top part of the ACC that's bad. It's the fact that there's a lot of dead weight in this conference that some schools don't want around. I'll never forget back in 2021 when the news broke at the ACC football kickoff. Were you there that year, TJ, or did you start coming afterwards?
I came afterwards.
Okay, because I remember 2021. That was the wildest year, obviously, because that was when we were at the ACC football kickoff, and the news broke that the SEC was going to add Oklahoma and Texas, and that's what ultimately shook up college sports. And we were talking about solutions for the ACC. And one of the ones that was brought up routinely to me is cutting the dead weight out of the ACC. Obviously, you know who the top weight is. The old Magnificent Seven, Tech, Virginia, Carolina, NC State, they're tied together as state schools. FSU, Clemson, Miami. I'll put Louisville in there. They want to spend big on sports. There may be a couple of others that are willing to do it. But there's a good chunk of them that just don't. And that's because, and that has given the ACC this perception of being a boutique conference. You're trying to compete with big corporations in a boutique world. Look, we love local business as much as anyone in the fast lane. But if you're a local business, you're not sitting there going, let me try to go head to head with Walmart out there. That's going to be a great idea. If you want to play in that sandbox, you better load up to do it. If you're in the ACC and you're trying to play against it, go ahead. But it's why I think there's a big chunk of the ACC that Clemson and Florida State took the heat, but they're not the only ones who pushed for the revenue redistribution formula for performance-based in sports, but also the fact that those schools are probably more likely going to get it. It is the first step towards, if nothing else, Clemson and those schools in the ACC, they may be in the same conference as a Boston College or a Syracuse or a Pitt, but they want nothing to do with them in terms of having to really put themselves on the resume. That's why Clemson scheduled Notre Dame with that scheduling agreement for, basically, hey, we want at least a crack at Notre Dame every year. Miami wants it, other schools, because there are certain matchups that matter. Newsflash, people aren't sitting there going, ooh, I can't wait to see Syracuse against Notre Dame this week or Boston College against the Irish. Doesn't work. Miami versus Notre Dame to open the season or Clemson versus Notre Dame at another juncture, that gets people excited. There's something the ACC has been missing, and now they're paying the piper by having to ball on a budget and decide which schools are important. And if I'm Virginia, the thing I'd worry about is, what if a Big Ten school gets serious about lacrosse and says, hey, we want Lawrence Tiffany. Are you ready to staff up to give him that? Because if not, I guarantee there's a Big Ten school that's sitting out there going, we'd love to be a lot better at lacrosse. Or maybe one of these schools that doesn't have a program but wants to start a lacrosse program. I don't even know if Michigan has it, but let's just throw them as an example because they're a big spender. If Michigan says, hey, we want to become really good at lacrosse, let's target a coach. If I'm at Michigan, I'm making that phone call. Absolutely. So if I'm thinking in the ACC's terms, you better believe that's the direction that you're going. And that's what you have to battle every single season. And when it's harder, yes. But there's also the fighting perception-wise of the ACC, which is that the ACC previously had been more worried about the smaller schools bringing them ahead rather than appeasing the top-end schools. Well, now they're at the point where the top-end schools want nothing to do with the smaller end. I think Virginia's, truthfully, if you gave them truth serum, they're probably in the boat of, we're in the top half revenue-wise, brand cachet-wise. Florida State and Clemson may have bloodied their knuckles, but Tech, UVA, and others are basically sitting there going, you know what, we're kind of in the same boat you are. We want nothing to do with these other programs that are essentially deadweight and hindering our perception, making it harder for us to get into conferences. And when we play them in sports, we have really nothing to gain by it. And that's the reality of where we are in the ACC. Fast 5 at 5-ish, we'll table it tomorrow. More on this with Jerry Ratcliffe when we return. We'll go in depth after Shane Metlin of DNRonline.com talking JMU. This is the Fast Lane covering the Commonwealth, comes your way next on the VTR in Sports app, and ask that smart speaker, open VTR in Sports.
Get more at the Used Car Superstore on the Sheeler Motor Mile, your premier used car dealer serving Southwest Virginia and surrounding areas for over 50 years. With more selection, more value, and more finance options. Plus, your trade is worth more. Get the best selection with more Hondas, more Hyundais, all your favorite makes and models. Over 900 used vehicles in stock now. That's way more than any other dealer in the area. Volume selling means volume pricing, and we've got the volume all in one location on the Motor Mile. The Used Car Superstore is your one stop for cars, trucks, vans, and SUVs. Many have miles in the teens, remaining factory warranties, and some are even local one-owner vehicles. Plus, Sheeler owns the finance company. Getting approved for credit is easy on the Motor Mile with financing options for every budget. We finance your future, not your past. You're a valued customer and not just a number on the Motor Mile. Get more with straightforward pricing and more inventory arriving daily. Over 900 vehicles on the lot ready to choose from. The Used Car Superstore on the Sheeler Motor Mile. I-81 exit 118C in Christiansburg. Call 866-SHEELER1. Always open at Sheeler.com.
Experience, reputation, growth. These are what make Brownstone Properties the area's most trusted property management company. With the recent addition of 15 new communities at Smith Mountain Lake, we have expanded our HOA portfolio to over 80 communities across the region. Combine these with over 2,500 residential units, and it's easy to see why our reputation and business continue to grow. Let our experience work for you. Visit us today at brownstoneproperties.com or 3720 Old Forest Road in Lynchburg.
Few things are more majestic than nature as long as it's outside your house. Unfortunately, when wildlife gets inside your chimney, it leads to problems for your chimney and your house. Prevent this problem with Black Goose Chimney Service. They provide one-time solutions to ensure the wildlife stays outside your home. And if you've had wildlife inside your house, Black Goose Chimney Service can deal with the aftermath and make sure they don't return. Call Black Goose Chimney Service and visit them at blackgoose.net.
Car insurance rates are rising rapidly. That's no secret. It's because the cost of medical care for those who are injured and the repair and replacement cost of damaged vehicles is skyrocketing. But what can you do about it? Hi, this is Judd Gardner with Gardner Insurance Solutions in Lynchburg. We've been helping Central Virginia drivers purchase the coverage they need at affordable prices since 1993. Talk with us before you pay again. We represent numerous companies and have many cost-saving strategies. Gardner Insurance Solutions, 434-316-5433.
Have you looked at your home's exterior lately? Do you see faded siding, paint peeling, and wood rotting, windows that are impossible to open and close, and gutters falling off? Call Collins Siding and Windows to transform your home's exterior and save you money on energy costs. Dreaming of a new porch or sunroom? Collins can do that too. Since 1989, Collins Siding and Windows has been transforming homes in Central Virginia. Roofs, windows, siding, gutters, porches, decks, and sunrooms. They can do it all. Call Collins Siding and Windows today, 434-525-6307.
Head to lynchburg-hillcats.com to lock in your tickets for the Lynchburg Hillcats this season. Now here's BTR in Sports.
Step into the Fast Lane 24/7 at Trey Lyle VT and Fast Lane Ed Lane on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and wherever you listen to podcasts. Now, back to the Fast Lane.
ACC baseball and UVA are not the only ones that are in the news. We also have the JMU Dukes to kick it off in part one of
It's time for your teams and topics. Covering the Commonwealth, a look at teams and topics from around the Commonwealth. Let's start with the JMU Dukes.
with Shane Metlin, DNRonline.com, and it's Shane_DNR Sports on Twitter to keep up with him there as well. Shane, great to be speaking with you in the Fast Lane. Your colleague, Katie Harper, spoke a couple days ago with JMU AD Matt Roan about the baseball season in particular, and Marlon Eikenberry having a disappointing year coming off of that 2024 season, which was a real epic one, playing for a regional championship down at NC State just last year. Is this the fall off because of transfers going out of the program? Was it a natural fall off because of graduation, or bigger concerns that may be hovering over Eikenberry heading into the 2026 campaign?
Maybe a little bit of everything. I don't know. Yeah. They did lose, Mike Mancini is a really good transfer player who ended up being really good at Vanderbilt. So there's that. There was, just the natural progression of guys graduating. It was a senior laden group that made it to that regional down in Raleigh in 2024. And the fact that they, didn't really build off of that, probably does continue to put a little bit of pressure on Marlon Eikenberry going forward. I mean, that was by far his best season at JMU. They've been, an average at best program in both the CAA and the Sun Belt. So I think there's just a little bit of all three of those things that, it's, they're going to have to find talent somewhere. But, next year is going to be a huge year probably for the program.
You mentioned also, and you've got this, and so does your colleague Katie Harper from DNRonline.com, Shane, about facilities. How do you balance that if you're JMU, where, are facilities more important for a program like JMU, where odds are you're not going to ever be able to get into a bidding war for a player, so you're competing in a different financial tier, and facilities may have more of an impact than, oddly enough, like some of these SEC or Big Ten programs where they really don't need to invest much more in facilities.
Yeah, and some of those SEC and Big Ten programs, you look around, not just baseball, but everywhere, you wonder what else they could possibly do to enhance their facilities. Where, at JMU, there's no video board at the baseball field. You have to there's indoor batting cages and nice locker rooms and things like that, but they're not right next to the field like at some places. And it's just, baseball's one of the few sports at JMU where facility-wise, they're not really matching up to the top teams in their conference. The basketball arena is spectacular. The football venue is good, and the practice and the APC where they have their offices and everything for football and weight room is up to standard. Volleyball facility is great. I mean, across the board, they're in really good shape facility-wise, but baseball just doesn't live up to a place like Southern Miss where, I mean, if you're watching the regionals this week, you see what they have there. Louisiana, Coastal Carolina, Georgia Southern, those are all really, really nice baseball facilities that JMU just doesn't really match up to.
Yeah, it's kind of amazing to think about that. And you have to balance that with paying players and other sports that go into this as well. Shane, last one for you. You got an article up from a couple days ago at dnronline.com about Preston Spradlin balancing out his preferred style of play, but also dealing with the reality that it's harder than ever to have a rigid system. Is it more standards over philosophies now for Spradlin as it should be for most coaches?
Yeah, I think so. And I think it's, it's just a matter of, some years you may go out and you get a 7-footer that you want to kind of build around and play around in the paint. And last year they ended up with a couple of 7, not quite 7. They were both 6'11", but a couple of, power conference transfers that they kind of wanted to play around inside. They're going to be smaller this year, going to be more guard oriented. They were guard oriented last year. They had some good guards, but it's going to be a team maybe that can get up and down and run a little bit more than they did last year. And it's just, you're going to have to adjust to your personnel a little bit more, unless you're like you're running an old Princeton offense type of thing and you just find the guys who can do it. And you have a real kind of, I don't want to say gimmick system, but if you have a system where you just find players who maybe aren't the most talented and most athletic to fit it, that's different. But I think for JMU and for a lot of mid-majors, it's going to be, okay, well, we're not as big this year, so we're going to play a little bit differently, or we got multiple point guards, we're going to play a little bit differently. And that's kind of what you're going to see going forward is it's a year-to-year adjustment.
Shane, thank you for your time talking some JMU Dukes. We will keep it locked to dnronline.com and at Shane_DNR Sports on Twitter for more of your great coverage.
All right, thanks.
With JerryRatcliffe.com, founder and contributor, Jerry Ratcliffe with us here in the Fast Lane. Jerry, a week ago, we're talking about Virginia getting screwed over by the NCAA selection committee. Now a much bigger loss, which is the departure of Brian O'Connor heading to Mississippi State. Was it the getting screwed over part? Was it just the ultimate realization of the realities financially between those two programs? What were the primary factors that drove Brian O'Connor out of Charlottesville and towards Stark Vegas within an hour of Mississippi State's baseball season ending last night?
Well, Ed, I think it depends on which storyline or which side you want to believe. There's one faction that believes that Virginia wasn't giving him what he needed to win with the newly revised 34 scholarship limit. Others argue that donors had put up the money to do that. We don't know if it was done in advance or a last-minute thing to try to keep him here. There were other complaints that we know that O'Connor had. The other side says he had no quibbles with the way things were going, and that O'Connor was more worried about the division between the ACC and SEC and ongoing budgets for the future of baseball. And in his statement, he just said he needed a new challenge. So we're still trying to sort all these things out. And again, it depends on which storyline you choose to follow because there's several options out there.
Have you reached a conclusion? It's okay if you've not, but have you reached an idea of which one you believe is more of the driving factor for Brian O'Connor leaving Virginia for Mississippi State?
Well, I know he had told some of his former players that had complained about some of the things that he was concerned about that apparently Virginia didn't address until late. We were told that alumni, there was in the last 72 hours, there was a big push to raise millions of dollars to keep him here and satisfy all of the issues in Virginia's baseball program. And we were told that was too late, that he was saying, well, I have to do this every time I need something, threaten to leave. So, again, we're trying to sort it all out to see who's right, who's wrong, and why he really did leave. Some people felt like that he is worried that the ACC is going to fall so far behind. There's going to be such a chasm between ACC baseball being able to compete as opposed to SEC baseball, and that the ACC might even fall apart. So there's so many stories swirling out there, Ed, that it may take a while to sort them all out.
Well, at least from a content standpoint, it'll give us something to monitor until we get to the ACC football kickoff in about 6 weeks down in Charlotte, Jerry. While we're on that front, though, I'll never forget the 2021 version of that event in July of 2021 when Oklahoma and Texas had just joined the SEC, and there were a lot of consternation within the ACC that there needed to be more of a divide, and there was becoming a divide in terms of the schools that financially wanted to compete and were willing to embrace the new trend, which was at that time a trend. Now it's a reality, the pay-for-play model. Is this one situation for Virginia where you can blame Carla Williams, but is it maybe even beyond her, or maybe it's on her to convey to the university that, the ACC, it seemed like for a while, and Virginia may have been in this boat, they kind of turned their nose up at the idea of paying for players, and they've caught on to it, but it's a little bit too late, at least in some of these cases.
Well, that's a good question. They did turn their nose up to it at first, but over the past year, I think they realized that if they want to be pertinent in the major sports going forward, that they're going to have to pay for it until somebody brings some sanity to college athletics. But their war chest for football and basketball is way up there near the top, and maybe some of the other sports could be too. We don't know that, but that's certainly a big issue going forward. And the way the SEC and the Big Ten continue to separate themselves from everybody else is a major concern. I know, but I think just getting hammered in football and basketball over the last couple of seasons taught them a painful lesson that if they want to compete, then they're going to have to put up the numbers. And some of their donors anteed up. I'll have to give them credit for that. And we'll see what happens going forward. But right now, they should be in position to compete until things get even crazier than they are now.
So we'll wrap it up on this because this is a storyline of Virginia losing baseball coach Brian O'Connor to Mississippi State that we touched on earlier. Fast Lane, Ed Lane, wherever you listen to podcasts, because right there. And then, of course, we'll be discussing all the fallout over the next handful of weeks with you, Jerry. But this being the ACC, you mentioned football and men's basketball and the money being invested there. We're seeing it at schools, Miami, Virginia Tech, others that are investing in those programs. Is the ACC, though, as a conference in more of a ball on a budget mindset where their programs and their fans need to give into that program because they don't have as much overall revenue to support the athletic department and the athletic in the conference the way that the bigger programs in the SEC and the Big Ten do?
Yeah, I think you're right. Somebody mentioned that the SEC is going to be expecting $100 million a year as opposed to $50 million a year for the ACC, and that's a gap that is just you just can't do anything about it. And the SEC is dominating everything right now. I mean, look what they did in football and basketball, and even what they had 13 teams, I think, invited to the baseball playoffs. Money talks, and a lot of it's generated from SEC football, and they've done a great job in basketball of becoming pretty much the dominant conference in that sport. So I think the ACC is going to have to figure something out, or it could very well fall apart.
It's crazy to think about that. And I mean, we might be in some version where it's just kind of the best of the Big 12, the best of the ACC, and then a shedding of someone else. But hey, it'll give us something to discuss, Jerry. We appreciate your time doing that today here in the Fast Lane, and we'll keep it locked to jerryratcliffe.com for more. All
right, Ed. Thank you, brother.
with David Cunningham, TechSideline.com managing editor, with us once again here in the Fast Lane. David, when you looked at Brian O'Connor leaving Virginia for Mississippi State, did you sit there and go, well, Virginia fans, we just went through that with Kenny Brooks leaving for maybe not the best SEC women's basketball program, but certainly one with more resources, and say, yep, welcome to the new reality that we've been living in as well?
Yeah, I think it's almost a very similar situation, a little bit different considering O'Connor won a national championship. But Kenny Brooks took the program to the Final Four, and both had really, really good success. I do find the part that UVA not making the NCAA tournament, I think that kind of accelerated things. But you could honestly say that, the injury to Elizabeth Kitley and the way Virginia Tech season ended, that could be honestly a similar parallel. I think we're in this reality now, Ed, where the SEC, so many resources are being devoted not just to football and basketball, but to all sports. And as a result, good coaches who have had success elsewhere and want really good opportunities to compete at the highest level, maybe compete for national championships. Well, in a lot of ways, their best interests lie in the SEC. And I think it's very interesting. These last couple of years, UVA, has lost Bronco Mendenhall, Tony Bennett, and Brian O'Connor. Well, Virginia Tech, lost Kenny Brooks, one coach, but you just take Virginia Tech athletics year as a whole. Well, the Hokies didn't really lose any coaches, but I don't know that that's a good thing, considering the Hokies didn't really have much success at all. Football, men's basketball, women's basketball. I mean, nobody had success right there. The best season of anybody was women's soccer reaching the Elite Eight. And nothing against that program, but you need your best three programs, the biggest three, or even fourth in baseball, to perform. So it's an interesting balance, certainly dynamic right now in the Commonwealth of Virginia. I don't know who you'd rather be right now. I'm not really sure either of the athletic directors likes the spot they're in, but I don't think they'd trade it for the other spot either.
Yeah, I mean, and especially if you're a solid brand in the ACC, and Virginia Tech, at least, you would think they're much more desirable than programs like Syracuse and Pitt and Boston College and some of those. At least Virginia Tech has got that going for them. And because of that, how much of it goes into the point that you brought up just a second ago, which is there's no coaching turnover. A lot of that in Blacksburg is, do you really want to ask your alumni to make big changes? I know they made some to the pitching staff and the assistant coaches for Coach Chef's squad in baseball, but do you really want to go for a big sale change when you may be making a football department change if things go south quickly, and it may be even bigger than that with athletic director Whit Babcock going too?
Yeah, that's the tough part, Ed. I think we're in a little bit of a stalemate in Blacksburg where, Brent Pry, this is a make or break season for him, and Whit Babcock understands it. He's said it before. He's not getting the opportunity to hire another football coach. So if for some reason Brent Pry doesn't pan out, well, you're probably replacing the AD as well. Some people have questions about the president, Tim Sands. That is kind of up to the Board of Visitors. So it's a little bit of a separate discussion, similar discussion to Whit Babcock. But yeah, I mean, you're looking at an athletic department that arguably had one of its worst years, if not the worst year. We'll see when the Learfield Directors Cup officially comes out, the full rankings at the end of the season in sometime in mid-June. But this is one of the worst years Virginia Tech has had across the department under Whit Babcock in his decade plus being here. And part of that is, well, football only won 6 games. You've got a new women's basketball coach, and I assume Megan Duffy will get that program on back on the right track, and they'll be back in the tournament next year. And I think Mike Young will rebound from a really, really difficult season. But when you have all these individual cases where baseball has only been to one NCAA tournament under John Sheff, and I think people were hoping softball would be able to do something special, and unfortunately, Hokies ran into Alabama. So all these separate individual scenarios, and you compile that into one giant athletic calendar year where, all of a sudden, you didn't really have a ton of success across the board. And it doesn't really make, I think, make sense to make some wholesale changes, kind of like what you said, Ed, where your football coach and your AD are kind of on the fence right now, and their jobs are going to be on the line here soon, depending on how the season goes. If it goes well, we probably won't be having this conversation. We'll be having a much different one. But on the other side, if things don't go well in Blacksburg this year on the football front, you might have a lot of wholesale changes across the board. And in that case, you're going to potentially have a new athletic director who's going to want to come in and reevaluate every individual situation. So It's a little bit of, as I've described to other people, a stalemate, if you will, where it's kind of just waiting around and seeing what happens. And it all comes down to what happens on the football field, unfortunately.
Yeah, I mean, that's where it is. You're in that spot where you go, oh, my goodness, this is what we have to do. And you have to kind of ball on a budget, if you will, if you're a school in the ACC, somebody who's helping you with your budget, because it's great insight and it's worth the financial expense to get the inside access at techsideline.com. The man who's in charge of that, David Cunningham, managing editor, techsideline.com. David, good to have you. Thank you for your time, and we'll chat again.
Sounds good. I'll talk to you soon.
Yes, sir. Thank you. David Cunningham with us here to wrap up part one of covering the Commonwealth. Yes, we'll go a little bit longer today because when we return, Liberty Athletics, we haven't even recapped softball. So we do that next with John Manson from AseaofRed.com here in the Fast Lane.
At Big Boys Guns, one thing we've learned over a decade serving Central and Southwest Virginia is that you value the freedom to choose. That's why you'll find the largest selection of firearms, silencers, reloading equipment, ammunition, and AR-15 parts, all under one roof. And if it's not in stock, the BigBoysGuns.com web store shops warehouses on a live feed, so you'll know exactly when your product is here. Come see us on Route 460 in Blue Ridge and BigBoysGuns.com. That's Big Boys with a Z, Guns.com.
Pull up a seat and join our conversation. Around the Table with Vicki is my new local radio show and podcast discussing leadership, entrepreneurship, philanthropy, faith, and family.
What role would you say that innovation and adapting to change plays in your business strategy?
Oh my goodness, so much.
I think that's something we've learned through the last 5 years.
Well, I mean,
especially
honestly,
through COVID.
you've done a lot of that. I mean, as the younger generation brings Chat GTP and all these different things that you look at that brings, if you're not open to what technology is bringing, you just sort of die.
Well, that is something that you spearheaded not only in our family, but in our company, is that you've been telling us for 10 years, Mom, you've got to be able to adapt and change or your business stays stagnant and doesn't grow. And we've kind of listened to you about that. Whatever business that you're in, you better make sure that you've got a budget to be able to make those innovative changes along the way.
Stay in the front of that. You want to stay in front of technology. You got to embrace it. Or if you don't understand it, find somebody that does, because ultimately whoever embraces the innovation first wins.
Mm-hmm. And we love to be the one that wins.
Even the senior living world, I think the things that we've tried, we've always tried to be innovative and creative and doing something that if we go on a trip, we find something cool, we try to come back and bring that here.
Around the Table with Vicki, Saturdays at 10 a.m. on WIQO.
Hi, I'm Chuck from Aquatrack Adventures in Salem. The Virginia Talk Radio Network and InsaneRadioDeals.com have helped our company grow by sharing our company's message throughout Central and Southside Virginia. The gift cards and experiences sold on InsaneRadioDeals.com have brought us many new customers. If you're a business that wants to grow with a message that resonates and gets results, I highly recommend InsaneRadioDeals.com and the Virginia Talk Radio Network. Simply put, it works.
Car insurance rates are rising rapidly. That's no secret. It's because the cost of medical care for those who are injured and the repair and replacement cost of damaged vehicles is skyrocketing. But what can you do about it? Hi, this is Judd Gardner with Gardner Insurance Solutions in Lynchburg. We've been helping Central Virginia drivers purchase the coverage they need at affordable prices since 1993. Talk with us before you pay again. We represent numerous companies and have many cost-saving strategies. Gardner Insurance Solutions, 434-316-5433.
Your home is more than just walls and windows. It's where life happens. And at Right Choice Construction, we get that. We're not just builders. We're fathers, mothers, neighbors, just like you. And every nail and every beam reflects our commitment to creating a place you're proud to live in. With Right Choice Construction, you're choosing a team that's been perfecting the art of building for years. So build with us, build with experience, build with quality, build with Right Choice.
Step into the Fast Lane 24/7 at Trey Lyle VT and Fast Lane Ed Lane on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and wherever you listen to podcasts. Now, back to the Fast Lane.
It's been crazy. We had Memorial Day last week, and of course, a great time with a Memorial Day 10K run and 2-mile walk for the Type 1 Diabetes Experience. Help them a big success. Way more people signed up than in prior years. Those numbers have trended upwards, but this past year was fantastic, over at least 300. In fact, it might be more than that, but I would rather underestimate and then over-deliver when we get the final count in of people who signed up and showed up on race day. That was awesome. By the way, a big shout out to, I'm going to throw the names out there. First names, because I'm not going to get all the pronunciations. Zach, Josh, Michael, Mateus, and Tyler, who all finished ahead of me and did not get their shout out on the morning warm-up. Shame on them. But because of that event last week and because of Memorial Day, we did not have a covering the Commonwealth last week in the Fast Lane, which is why we now need to return to talking Liberty Athletics. John Manson at CFRed.com kicks off covering the Commonwealth.
It's time for your teams and topics. Covering the Commonwealth, a look at teams and topics from around the Commonwealth. Let's start with the Liberty Flame.
I had heart palpitations as I get my usher on here in the Fast Lane with a great confession. When I saw that Liberty and NC State men's basketball had scheduled a game, my guy Will Wade going up against Richie McKay next year. Yes, it's in Raleigh, but let's not worry about the minor details. The fact that Liberty was able to land that game, plus being part of some multi-team events going on, which feature a lot of other prominent programs that are mid-major programs, it looks like a real strong schedule. It's not official, but there are enough pieces that are coming together for Liberty men's basketball. Does John Manson agree or disagree? John, you can pick at my thoughts, or you can at least partially agree, or maybe fully agree. That would be awesome. What's your impression when you saw NC State, the latest, added to Liberty men's basketball last week?
Yeah, Ed, I agree with you. Anytime Liberty can get an ACC team on the schedule for men's basketball is a huge win. This will actually be the first time the Flames have played a ACC opponent in the regular season since 2017, when Coach McKay and the Flames went down to Winston-Salem and beat Wake Forest. And since then, it's dried up. Only had had an exhibition against Virginia Tech and then played Virginia Tech in the second round of the 2019 NCAA tournament. But other than that, there haven't been any ACC teams on the schedule, whether it's been a home, away, or neutral site. So, I think when we talk to Coach McKay next, we got to ask him how far back this relationship with Will Wade goes and where did it originate? Because, Liberty and under Coach McKay and Will Wade, they've been linking up everywhere he's been. It started when he was at VCU. They did a home-and-home series. And then they met up again when he was at LSU, played down there in Louisiana twice. And then this past year when he was at McNeese, obviously they had a really good season at McNeese before he's now at NC State. And it gets the Flames and Coach McKay back on the schedule. Game down in Raleigh, date to be announced later. But big game, big get for the Flames. And you mentioned the MTEs. They've got one in Orlando the week of Thanksgiving against some good mid-major competition. And then that Field of 68 challenge, that's a 3-year agreement with FAU and Charleston. It's the third and final years this coming season. So those two teams will be playing up at Liberty Arena this year. And so that's two, not just good games, but good home games, which Liberty's been hard to get the last few years, non-conference home games against quality of competition. So I'm sure that was a huge part of wanting to sign that deal, going back 2 years ago now for Coach McKay.
He doesn't like to talk about himself, Richie McKay, that is. But we'll talk about him because that's what we do anyway on the Sea of Red video pieces that you put up at your Twitter and Facebook and social media handles and YouTube, and of course at seaofred.com, John. But what does it say about Richie McKay that in an era where he's bemoaned how challenging it is for Liberty men's basketball to schedule these type of games and opponents, that they've done it before with Will Wade, they've done it before with Alabama, and I know there are relationships that are there with Liberty and Alabama as well in men's basketball, but the McKay has strong enough relationships that in certain spots, he's able to leverage those to at least get on the schedule and do something positive for Liberty's basketball schedule.
Yeah, it's definitely paid dividends. You mentioned that with, Will Wade, and like we were talking, and then also previously, with Alabama, they had a couple games with them, and he's got a relationship with that coaching staff, and I'd really like to see, Liberty, talking about the men's basketball scheduling, like to get, more home and homes with some solid mid-majors. You know, we mentioned VCU. Let's get that one back on the docket. You know, Richmond. There's lots of good mid-major basketball in the Commonwealth of Virginia and neighboring states as well, too. Would love to see, you know, a series with Radford, brought back, you know, since those teams played in the Big South, haven't, you know, played much. They had one series that was kind of on the docket and played, I think it was in 2019. But then the return game was never played and got canceled due to COVID and hasn't been made up. So a lot, you know, VMI. I mean, there's plenty of teams in the Big South, SoCon, CAA, you know, A10, even George Mason. That, you know, would be great to have some home and home dates with those type of schools. You know, just to continue to beef up the home schedule. When I talk to Liberty fans, they're, you know, especially when you're trying to sell season tickets, which I know Liberty hasn't had problems doing that at Liberty Arena here in the last couple of years. But, you know, certainly if you can have, you know, more Charleston and FAUs and VCUs and teams like that on your non-conference home schedule, that certainly can increase the value of your season tickets.
John Manson, a seaofred.com, and at JC Manson on Twitter, with us here in the Fast Lane. John, you brought up that point. Why is it, and obviously we'll both try to ask Ian McCall when we get a chance to speak with him, but how is it that, you know, football seems like they're doing that? They've had ODU previously. This year they start the home and home with JMU, whereas in basketball it seems a little bit more challenging.
Yeah, it definitely has been more challenging. And I'm not sure. I mean, a lot goes into it. When you're a G5 in football, there's only so many G5 teams, right? You got, I think this year it's up to 136 FBS teams, whereas, you know, in Division I basketball, you're 360 some odd teams. So it's a lot more. And, you know, if Liberty calls up a VCU, which I'm sure they've done, maybe depending on who that head coach is, they may think that they shouldn't do a home and home with a team like Liberty out of Conference USA. Maybe they think that, you know, that's a bye game, and you know, Liberty is probably thinking, oh, well, we should be home and home with A10. I mean, Conference USA is a top 10 conference in the league, and Liberty's proven to be at the top of that league and one of the top mid majors in the country. So I'm sure there's a lot that goes into it. And I mentioned, you know, some of the Big South schools, and I mean, even High Point, I think, would be a good game Liberty could get. But it's just been difficult. And, you know, I'm sure there's reasons why, you know, Liberty's coaching staff may not want to play particular schools for whatever reasons. And I'm sure you got the same thing on the other end as well, too. And it's just trying to link those up. But, I mean, it would certainly be good. I know football's done a good job, like you mentioned, with, you know, JMU, ODU, Coastal Carolina as well, too. And there's a lot. There's even more basketball programs, you know, regionally, you know, UNC Greensboro and East Tennessee State. I mean, we could, you know, list a whole bunch of them, but William and Mary as well too. So, you know, it'd be great to get some of those. And like football, I mean, those schedules are made so many years out. You know, it just would be, you know, basketball. It's, you know, you typically make them, you know, the summer before the season, sometimes 1 year out. You know, but it'd definitely be interesting to have that conversation with Coach McKay. And I know I've talked to him about it some before. And every team's playing that, you know, net game, right? You know, trying to get those quad one games if you can. And then if you don't have a quad one game, you're probably better off getting a quad four that you can, you know, try to win by 20 plus points. And that's just how you play the net game these days. And I know Liberty's playing it just like every other school that's, you know, competing on the national level to be a, you know, top 100, even top 50 team nationally.
You know, and I'll say this, John, as John Manson from seaofred.com is here in the Fast Lane on W227BG Timberlake, WVGM AM Lynchburg, WMNA Gretna, Danville, Southside, the VTR and Sports app, and ask that smart speaker, open VTR and Sports, as well as Fast Lane, Headlane, socials, and where you listen to podcasts. But John, you know, I'll say this. I completely get why you didn't want to play Virginia when Tony Bennett was there, and the relationship between McKay and Bennett, and the fact that that's there. But the rest of them, it'd be pretty exciting. You know, by the way, I love it if you bring the HBCUs in, maybe during like the holiday season, and if they can bring their bands, you could have kind of a battle of the bands going on over at Liberty Arena.
Yeah, I'll be all for that. And Liberty has played a few of those, you know, MEAC and SWAC schools in recent years. North Carolina Central here recently, North Carolina A&T as well too. So, you know, some of those games have happened, but like I was saying, there are so many quality mid-major basketball programs within a 4-hour bus ride from Lynchburg that I feel like you should be able to get a couple of those on the docket each and every year. And I know Liberty's kind of trying to get some quad one games, obviously against some of those high majors and power fours. And they obviously got one this year with NC State, but so many times you're not going to get those teams to come to Liberty Arena. So you got to go on the road and maybe get a neutral game with them. But if you could get like I mentioned, some of these other teams, George Mason, VCU, Richmond, William Mary, list goes on and on, to do some home and homes, it certainly would, at least from a fan's perspective and media perspective, following the games, watching those games. I'd much rather head down to Liberty Arena on a Tuesday evening to watch Liberty take on VCU than, Liberty against, insert, UT Arlington, somebody who played last year. No offense to UT Arlington, is just no regional draw. So interesting conversation and something I'm sure we can touch on in more detail as we get, further into the summer.
We most definitely will. And if you're wondering why we're not asking softball questions from John today, that's because Dr. Dot Richardson in studio Tuesday in the Fast Lane for 2 segments. The last 2, we're excited about that. Fast Lane Ed Lane, where you listen to podcasts if you miss it live, 5:30-ish on the VTR and Sports app. John, thank you as always. It's great to have you in the Fast Lane. We're always stoked for it, and we'll keep it locked to a SeaofRed.com, and who knows, we might even get a softball question in next time.
Awesome. Thanks for having me on, Ed, and I look forward to hearing your interview with Dr. Dot Richardson on tomorrow.
Well, we appreciate that as well. John Manson with us here in the Fast Lane. With Danny Peters of FrontStretch.com, he was at Nashville. Danny, was that an exhale that you heard from Ryan Blaney, who'd been bitten by bad luck at certain junctures and still needs to figure out a way to close more consistently? But boy, when he had the opportunity as that race started to unfold at Nashville, he seemed like he asserted himself among that triumvirate with Denny Hamlin and William Byron of the cars to beat.
Hey Ed, how you doing? Thanks for having me on. Yeah, I think Blaney in the post-race press conference, he talked about not so much that it was a relief, but just that he'd happy that he had executed a race. He had speed in the car. He was clearly the fastest car on the day, leading 139 laps. And after 5 DNFs to open the season, I think he was just glad to finally put a good race together and with a car with the speed, sort of cruise to the victory.
It was cool to see that particular part with Ryan Blaney. Underwhelming, from a 1.5 mile standpoint, and Nashville has generally produced good racing. Am I the only one who believes it wasn't horrible last night, but it didn't quite have the same level of oomph the 1.5 miles have had, and even that Nashville has had the last couple of years under the same car configuration?
Yeah, I mean, I think also you've got to remember that this race ran at night and not in the day, and I think that made a difference. And yeah, I mean, it was hard to pass all day. It was hard to pass in all 3 series across trucks and Xfinity as well. And yeah, it was a little bit underwhelming. I think Blaney led, the last 80 or 90 laps, and no one really got that close to him, or at least to the point where they were going to challenge for the lead. So, yeah, but one guy we did see passing a lot was Carson Hocevar. He started in 26th, and he ran all the way up to second place. So there were some opportunities to pass, but not so much for the lead.
Nobody is more in the tank for a young driver than I am for Ty Gibbs, as your FrontStretch.com colleagues love to mock me, justifiably so, Danny, especially the group on the Happy Hour podcast every Tuesday night. But are we at the point now where when you look at young guns that are still searching for their first win, how do you not think Carson Hocevar is the one that's going to take that next step, given not just what he did at Nashville, but the fact that he's consistently running well and seemingly maximizing inferior equipment?
Yeah, I mean, Carson Hocevar equaled his best ever finish. That's his second place finish. And, he talked in the post-race press conference on pit road afterwards about kind of being frustrated that he wasn't able to take the next step. I mean, he was clear to clarify that Blaney was the best car on the day, but you can see there's a fire burning inside him. And it would not surprise me to see him win and make it to the playoffs, or certainly win this year. And, you mentioned Ty Gibbs, and it's been a tough year for Ty Gibbs. No question. And I got to talk to him a little bit in the the bullpen on Saturday morning, and I was actually asking him about Denny Hamlin, who had his 700th start, and saying to him, what are kind of your memories of Denny, and how's he been with you? And Ty sort of looked at me and he was like, what year did Denny start? And I was like, 2005, and Ty was like, yeah, I was 3, which shows you the age difference between the veteran and the youngster. But Ty sort of then went on to talk about how Denny Hamlin's been like family to him, and it makes sense, really, doesn't it? Ty grew up with that team, with that organization. But I think the hope for Ty is that he can find a way to turn it around, because he's clearly a talented race car driver. He's shown that in the lower series. He's just not getting the rub of the green in Cup this year. But I wouldn't give up on him just yet. But I would say, if you're asking who's more likely to win their first race, then Hocevar is that man, and I would not be surprised to see it happen this season.
There are a number of these other drivers. Chris Buescher at times, Brad Keselowski's had a rough year. Bubba Wallace has been inconsistent. Eric Jones as well. Out of those type of drivers who've won but need to get back to victory lane, I'll throw Alex Bowman in there. Do you have a level of confidence of which one does next? Or are we at the point now where, it's so inconsistent with them, you might as well just pull out a couple of dice and roll them up and see what number pops up?
Yeah, I mean, all those drivers you named could win a race, and you had, Bubba came back from a speeding penalty to finish 6th on the night in Nashville, and Keselowski has at times shown the speed, but again, like some other drivers, he hasn't had the results. And Chris Buescher is a driver that's proven in the last few years that he can win races, can win multiple races. So, yeah, I think you're probably right. It's a little bit of a throw the dice, and certainly if you look at the sort of the next spell of races, we've got 4 road courses. We've got 2 drafting tracks before the playoffs. But perhaps if there's one you would point to, it might be Chris Buescher, because he won at Watkins Glen last year, and with some road courses coming up, perhaps Buescher is the one in that crew to break the duck. But again, I think all of them are perfectly capable of winning. And Bowman had a strong start to the season. He's had an awful last 6 or 7 weeks. But again, the speed in those Hendrick cars, and all those drivers have proven they can get to victory lane. And I would expect them all to do so again.
Yes, it would. It would be fun to see that. We will see what the next step is on that front. Meanwhile, we'll keep it locked to Danny Peters on Twitter. God, you got the easiest Twitter handle for a name like that. Good on you for being one of the first to jump on that. And, of course, all the work that you contribute as well at frontstretch.com.
Thank you, Ed.
Danny Peters with us here in the Fast Lane.
And last but not least, or maybe just for you haters,
it's a flaw on my part. I saw the L and thought it was going to be this.
The Lynchburg Hellcat.
And clearly went in the wrong direction. Meanwhile, I may be going in the wrong direction, but they're not. They took 5 of 6 from Fredericksburg, sweeping a doubleheader in the process. Is this the most impressive series that you've seen, at least over the last month, Jason, from the Lynchburg Hillcats top to bottom, the way they seem to have control over the Washington Nationals single A team, the Fredericksburg Nationals?
You know what? I'll go out on a limb and say this is the most impressive series victory that we've seen in my 4 years with the Hillcats. Winning 5 out of 6 is never easy, and to do it against an in-state rival when you're in the midst of a playoff chase, man, that is one of the best and most impressive performances I've ever seen. I mean, on Friday night, I believe it was, they had 1 hit going into the 9th inning and somehow came back to win. This is a team that scratches and claws and fights and refuses to go down easily. Their only loss, they probably should have won. They had the bases loaded with nobody out in the 9th inning. It was, and somehow they were able, Fredericksburg was able to escape without allowing a run. I don't even think it's that big of a stretch to say that was the most impressive 6-game series that we've had in 4 years.
And you mentioned the playoff chase because it's split into 2 halves, the single A season, which is a lot different than what you would normally find. By the way, we've got a man that can verify what you just said about one of the most impressive series. TJ Wilkerson, your colleague up there at City Stadium, because he is the PA announcer. TJ, we're going to put you on the spot now. Is Jason onto something, saying this is certainly, if it's the most impressive in his 4 years, would you say it's at least the most impressive of the season in the homestands the Hillcats have had?
Absolutely, especially after what happened when they went on the road to the Nationals. They came home and desolated them.
I'll say this. One of the cool things from yesterday was seeing people around town afterwards with the vintage logos and the logo jersey giveaway day from the Lynchburg Hillcats. Did you snag one of those for yourself, Jason?
I wish, but they were for kids, and unfortunately, my body does not fit in the size of a kid's T-shirt anymore. So I had to sit on the outside on this one, but I really wish I could have fit in one.
What's funny is I saw a lot of ladies wearing it, svelte ladies that can fit into that. I mean, hey, kudos to them for taking advantage of it. I mean, I couldn't make it look good either. So I'm in that boat. But you mentioned where we are with the Hillcats. They get ready to go to Salem this coming week. That momentum, is it easier to carry because it's also on top of this? It's a trip nearer and it's a rivalry-based series?
Yeah, I mean, we've had Salem's number for the past 2 seasons. And the last time we were out in Salem, we also took 5 of 6. So this is a series that I expect us to win. And we have it right in our grasp. The Carolina Mudcats come to town the following week on June 10th. They're the team that's ahead of us in first place. The Hillcats know that. The whole team is aware of that. They're ready. They're scratching. They're clawing. They're itching to get back home for that series, but they know they have to take care of business on the road and set themselves up well for a chance against the Mudcats next week.
Jason, for all the ways that the Hillcats have played very well and the scrappiness and the consistency, you've got a great article that dropped just a couple of days ago at lynchburg-hillcats.com about Sean Matson, who's part of the Hillcats this year. His sister is Erin Matson, who is the national championship winning field hockey coach at the University of North Carolina, and I would say inarguably the greatest field hockey player in college field hockey history. My wife coaches, so I do know something about that sport. What is that competitive gene brought to the Hillcats this year?
Well, I think it's just been huge because Sean Matson has been asked to step into a variety of different roles. At the start of the season, he was the stalwart of the bullpen. He was the one guy that you could call on when every other pitcher in the bullpen was struggling. We talked about that at times, Ed. He was the guy that was able to come out and really set the tone, and he was consistent. You knew what you were going to get from him every single time out. And now he's been asked to fill a starting role with some injuries that we've had to our starting rotation, and he's continued that. It's just a mindset from him, and he pushes everybody else in the bullpen, in the pitching rotation, just to be better, to get stronger, and to be prepared. So Sean Matson, those competitive juices flow all the way back from his childhood, going up against his sister, but they are pushing the rest of the team forward right now.
It's a cool story, and one that's up at lynchburg-hillcats.com from Jason Prill. Sean Matson, who is the brother of North Carolina field hockey coach Erin Matson, quite the genetic skill set they have, but also the competitive drive to be great, and it has bled over for the Lynchburg Hillcats. Thank you for your time today, Jason. We held you a little bit longer. You've been patient enough with us, so we appreciate that, and we'll chat again soon.
Absolutely. Anytime, man. I'm always down.
Indeed. Jason Pro with us here in the Fast Lane. We went way overboard today, but thank you for joining us. We'll get back on a normal schedule tomorrow in the Fast Lane. Dr. Dodd Richardson in studio. In the meantime, on to wherever they are with Make It Rain with VSiN and a 7 o'clock airtime tonight for the Texas Tech-Oklahoma softball game in the Women's College World Series.
Injury cases ranging from simple fender benders to complex tractor-trailer cases. And we're ready to put our experience to work for you. We hope you never need